Welcome to the Boxing Gossip channel. Please hit subscribe if you are new. I'd like to start by giving a shout out to Danny, who requested this video via my Patreon. So thanks to Danny for the support and for coming up with a pretty interesting topic. Danny said, I'd like to know if you could do a video on a hypothetical scenario. If there was a World Boxing Super Series at heavyweight, which fighters would you pick to take part? And more importantly, who would you like to come on top? I'd like to add that Tyson Fury would be at his best fully fit and had had a few tune-up fights. He acknowledges in his message that this is an unlikely situation. So I'm going to take this as, a sort of best case scenario. Who would be the fighters involved? Who would we most like to see in this kind of fight? So what I'm not going to do is drone on about which fighters would be unaffordable, which fighters would have promotional problems getting into it. We're going to go with absolute boxing fans, best case scenario, and how the tournament would look. So let me start by saying there's actually a number of really good heavyweight boxing matchups right now already active in the division. There's some really good fights already booked, and with that in mind, I actually think that a lot of the quarterfinals for a proposed tournament would be ready-made. These are fights that could be good to go. If you look at the current World Boxing Super Series, there was one fight in that already made, Eubank versus Abraham, where they kind of already fought for an eliminator, if you like. So their fight was already made, and it was for Eubank's IBO belt, I believe. But the fight served as an eliminator to actually enter the World Boxing Super Series. And with some of the matchups already made, I think you could kind of use that as a basis. Because right now I'm looking at the schedule. We've got Anthony Joshua versus Joseph Parker, pretty mouthwatering. Luis Ortiz versus Deontay Wilder, pretty mouthwatering. Lucas Browne versus Dillian White, I'm up for that. You've also got David Haye versus Tony Bellew. So, straight off, for a start, I'd have those four fights as eliminators to enter the fictional, hypothetical, fantasy World Boxing Super Series at heavyweight. Four great fights, the winners each going through. Now, I appreciate that guys like Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder are not going to fight eliminators to get into the World Boxing Super Series. I appreciate that they're already well in advance of that and probably well above that. But we're talking hypothetical, we're talking fictional in this example, and seeing as those fights are already made, I think that's the best way of describing it, because if this tournament was made in 6 months' time, well, one of AJ versus Parker would have taken a loss, one of Ortiz versus Wilder would have taken a loss, and those guys would kind of organically rule themselves out of immediate entry to the tournament anyway. So, if you kind of said that this tournament was taking place at the end of 2018, then you almost wouldn't have to say these fights serve as actual eliminators. You'd just pick the winners to go through into the World Boxing Super Series. So I'd say the winner of AJ Parker, position 1. The winner of Ortiz Wilder, position 2. The winner of Haye Bellew, position 3. The winner of Lucas Browne versus Dillian White, position 4. As Danny's mentioned in his question, he'd like to add a fully fit Tyson Fury into the mix. So I'd say that's position 5. I'm trying to think who that leaves us with. For me personally, I've always been a fan of Jarrell Miller. I think he's a very entertaining character. I think stylistically he brings a different test to the equation, so I'd throw in Jarrell Miller. I then also think you've got a few fascinating options from the sort of prospects who you could throw in. You may want to have a look at Hughie Fury. I know he came up short against Joseph Parker, but he fought a fight that many boxing fans felt the decision could have gone either way. Maybe you'd throw Hughie Fury into the mix. Maybe you'd want to throw Filip Hrgovic into the mix, the gold medalist. Kubrat Pulev. You could even have a look at throwing in someone who's coming from absolutely nowhere, like Joe Joyce, likes of Daniel Dubois, one of these really up-and-coming prospects. But if you're asking me, I'll go Tyson Fury, AJ Parker winner, Ortiz Wilder winner, Haye Bellew winner, Jarrell Miller, the White Brown winner, Hughie Fury, and Kubrat Pulev. I guess when the dust settles in 3 or 4 months, when those fights have taken place, you'd have to say that that is the consensus. Well, maybe you wouldn't say they're the top 8 ranked fighters, but you'd say those are 8 of the very, very top names in the sport, perhaps. The seed number 1 would clearly be the winner of Joshua Parker. For me, the seed number 2 would clearly be the winner of Wilder Ortiz. You'd probably throw Tyson Fury in as the 3rd seed. Maybe you'd have the Hay Bellew winner in as the 4th seed, and then you could square them off with the winner of Dillian Whyte versus Lucas Brown, Jarrell Miller, Kubrat Pulev. You know, just talking about this tournament, it's a real shame that it's not happening, because it would be the biggest thing in modern boxing history if it were to take place. But you know, clearly we're into sort of fancy matchup land here. Probably enough there about who would get into the tournament and who would be most interesting participants. Let's talk about who would most likely come out on top. Let's start by ruling people out. The World Boxing Super Series is a unique test because you have to have 3 high-level fights in relatively quick order. I'm going to rule David Hay out because I think he's too injury prone, and I think to go through 3 quick camps in succession would put too much of a strain on that aging body. I'm going to rule Luis Ortiz out because I think in a year's time, when this tournament would be reaching its conclusions, the damage from Father Time may be too much for him to be considered the number 1 heavyweight in the division. I'm going to rule Tony Bellew out because Tony Bellew himself has acknowledged on many occasions he's not a heavyweight, and he's not really up for fighting the bigger guys at heavyweight, such as your Anthony Joshua's and your Deontay Wilders. I'm going to rule Lucas Brown out because I think right now there's too many doubts about Lucas Brown surrounding the condition he's in, his inactivity out of the ring, his performance-enhancing drug resume, and we'll have to see how he actually looks before I'd consider him a serious competitor. For me, I'm going to rule out Jarrell Miller and Dillian Whyte. I think Jarrell Miller and Dillian Whyte are guys who at the minute still have a bit to prove in terms of their game, in terms of their boxing ability. And whilst they are guys who have the potential to get to higher echelons in the sport than they are now, I'm still seeing holes in their games that I'd want to see ironed out before I could pick them in a tournament of this nature. So that kind of leaves us with the big 4. Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, and Joseph Parker. I'd say Anthony Joshua possibly has a right to be the consensus favourite. He is the guy who, for me, has the strongest resume in the heavyweight division. He is the guy who stopped Vladimir Klitschko. And at present, he is the overwhelming favourite with the bookmakers and with the public against Joseph Parker. Deontay Wilder, he's a fighter who seems to be increasing in momentum. He has devastating power, and you'd have to make him in with a real chance of any fight within the heavyweight division. There is no fighter in the heavyweight division who I wouldn't give Deontay Wilder a live 30 to 40% chance of beating. However, I'm going to pick up on something that Danny said in his question. I'd like to add that Tyson Fury would be at his best fully fit and had had a few tune-up fights. Now, Danny did say that this is a hypothetical scenario and an unlikely situation. I, for one, have real doubts as to whether we'll ever see Tyson Fury hit the same levels in his career that he hit that night when he took on Vladimir Klitschko. But in the question, Danny's acknowledged that this is a hypothetical scenario, and he said that Tyson Fury would be at his best and fully fit. And based on that, I still believe Tyson Fury is better than the current crop of heavyweights, however strong they look, however devastating Joshua and Wilder have looked at times. Tyson Fury, for me, at the peak of his form, is the number 1 out there. Yes, Joshua stopped Klitschko, whereas Fury outpointed him. But for my money, Fury's performance was the more impressive of the 2. He took less damage in the fight. There was less chance of him ever losing the fight. And whilst he didn't win by knockout, his win, for me, was as convincing and by a wide enough margin over then Klitschko, who hadn't lost for 10 years, to make it the more impressive bit of form out of the two. That Tyson Fury brought a dynamic to the heavyweight division that no other top draw fighter currently brings. Hughie Fury brings it, but he brings it without the offensive capability at this point of Tyson Fury. Currently, Hughie Fury is a prospect who is better on the defensive side than he is of the offensive side. I'm not saying Tyson Fury is not equally defensively minded, but I am saying I believe Tyson Fury has more offense in his arsenal, proven at this point, than what Hughie Fury's shown in his career to date. I believe that dynamic that Tyson Fury brings, of the 6'8", 6'9" guy who can dance on the back foot, who's lightning fast with excellent timing, who can fight coming forward, coming backwards, who can fight from long range, who can make you miss, who's equally adept on the inside for such a big guy with such a big reach, a guy with such a big punch variety and punch arsenal. I'm yet to see how the likes of an Anthony Joshua or a Deontay Wilder deals with that sort of test. And there are bits and pieces of form in various fights that those two have had that you could pick holes in and say that a guy like Tyson Fury could really exploit. Picture, if you will, how the Deontay Wilder who faced Arthur Spilka would deal with the switch hitting, slick awkwardness of a guy like Tyson Fury, who's almost twice the size of a guy like Arthur Spilka. You know, picture how Anthony Joshua would deal with the elusiveness and fleet-footedness of a big guy like Tyson Fury, when at times in Joshua's career more recently, he's looked so heavy and somewhat flat-footed. For me, there are huge doubts about the future of Tyson Fury. But in the hypothetical world, when he bounces back to the very best, the same Tyson Fury who beat Vlad, I'd make him a favourite over every heavyweight out there, including the likes of Joshua, including the likes of Wilder, including the likes of Parker, David Haye, however you want to phrase it. These guys are very, very live in the fight. You know, you couldn't give Deontay Wilder less than a 40% chance. You couldn't give Joshua less than a 40% chance. I'm not saying it's easy work, but if I'm forced to make a decision, I'm going to say a fully fit Tyson Fury bouncing back to his best is the cream of the crop. Whether or not Fury is ever able to hit those heights is very questionable. He's been out of the ring, he's been inactive, he's blown up in weight, he's had well-documented health problems. It's a real question whether he hits those heights again in his career. If he comes back, if he looks like he's lost the step, for me, Wilder and Joshua are the consensus number 1 and number 2, and they would be the men to be most feared in this tournament. Percentage call for me would be that Anthony Joshua would be the man I would narrowly favour. I believe that whilst Deontay Wilder may potentially have better attributes, I believe that Anthony Joshua maybe makes slightly less mistakes in terms of his boxing game, and by a hair's breadth would pick Joshua to exploit the Wilder defence should that matchup ever be made. Let me know your thoughts. Bit of fun, bit of a fantasy matchup. Not one that I'm expecting Calais Sauerland to announce. I think if he did, he'd be even more popular than he is now. Let me know your comments in the section below. If you've enjoyed the video, please hit subscribe. Please hit the thumbs up button. As always, appreciate you guys tuning in.